Hello, everyone. My name is Przemysław Kusik, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of the National Education Commission in Krakow. I work at the chair for translator education and I specialize in legal translation studies. I've also been a practicing legal translator for about 10 years, including 5 years as a sworn translator. I am honored to be the advisor of students' legal translation and legal language research club, whose members' engagement and enthusiasm are an additional source of support for the argument I am going to put forward in this presentation. Namely, I would like to take on the challenge to convince you that legal translators will survive in the age of AI and also show you what it takes to become one if you decide to pursue this career, which I hope you will consider having watched this presentation. First of all, I'm going to briefly refer to those doomsday scenarios about AI and the translation industry, which you have definitely heard of. Then, I'm going to tell you about what legal translation is all about. In the third part, I would like to explain why I'm so sure that the legal translator profession will not disappear under the pressure of AI. In the fourth part, I would like to present one quick case study of a power of attorney, which I translated using ChatGPT. Finally, I'm going to tell you about a bright career path which is awaiting the brave, but which can still be worthwhile to pursue. So, first of all, AI and the translation industry. The first question is what AI has changed. Well, while generative AI has been with us for just a few years, machine translation technologies are not new and they have been there for decades and have been getting better and better over time. The fears about translators being replaced by machines are not new either. Obviously, AI is expected to have even greater potential and applicability. Hence, the question is whether translators are afraid of extinction. Will we disappear like dinosaurs? Opinions in the community of translators vary, but there is a realization that things are changing and will require some adaptation. It is obviously easier for people without translation skills to have AI do numerous translation jobs for them. This is not to say that AI and other technologies are not used by professional translators. They've been for decades. Therefore, while not everyone likes AI, and I must admit that I don't, it is not necessarily an enemy and may be helpful in daily work like other tools. Ultimately, there is nothing new on Earth. Inventions have transformed the ways of working and living throughout human civilization, and people have been able to adapt. Some jobs have disappeared, some have been created, and some have remained, although not exactly in the same form. Translations have been produced for thousands of years. This is actually, and legal translation is actually the oldest kind of translation, most probably predating the translation of the Bible. And in my opinion, it is not the end of this story. The doomsday is not coming yet, as nobody can say for sure what the world will be like in, say, 100 years. Before exploring my argument, perhaps just a few words about what legal translation is all about and why I am specifically focusing on this kind of translation. Well, there are multiple definitions, but one I find quite concise and at the same time comprehensive is that legal translation is the translation of texts for legal purposes and in legal settings. To realize what kind of texts these are, you need to think about law as some kind of cultural phenomenon that permeates our everyday life. There are few things law is not interested in. Whenever you visit a website, get on the bus, or enter some public building, there will be some terms and conditions, rules and regulations put up and hanging everywhere. A simple purchase at a baker's is a transaction regulated by the law of obligations. The clothes you are wearing and the device you are using to watch this video are subject to probably multiple legal regulations. Because trade and various other relations between countries and people living in different parts of the world are intensifying, there are quite a lot of legal matters that transcend national borders. There are also international organizations with multiple official languages. Therefore, a huge number of legal texts are translated on a daily basis, from a foreign birth certificate to an international treaty. It is hard to imagine how things would work in a variety of settings without the effort made every day by legal translators. You also may have heard of certified translation, that is, an official kind of translation issued by an authorized person or organization. In Poland, this is the task of a sworn translator. This is not exactly the same as legal translation because not all certified translations are of law-related text, and not all legal translations are certified. But typically, sworn translators work with legal texts quite often. And the last question in this part, is legal translation special? Well, you may say I'm biased, and perhaps I am, but I'm going to defend the view pointing to the special nature of legal translation. This is basically due to the fact that there are different legal systems around the world with their own legal languages. The law in Poland is not the same as the law in the jurisdiction of England and Wales, for example. And there is even a specialized field of law called comparative law that studies and explores the differences and similarities between legal systems. And well, while the terminology of chemistry, engineering, or biology typically relates to some objects in real world, some common points of reference, legal terminology is generally more culture bound or system bound. Therefore, when you translate a legal text, especially between different legal systems, this typically means crossing boundaries not only between languages but also between legal systems. Thus, legal translation requires more effort, especially in terms of terminological work, terminological research. Moreover, as it deals with law, it carries quite a lot of responsibility, since legal texts may have a profound effect on people's lives. This will become clearer when I proceed to the case study. But before I do so, let me say why I'm so sure that expert legal translators will resist the onslaught of AI. At this point, I would like to restate the question I asked in the description of this presentation. Would you like to entrust your personal details or some important information, basically your life, to AI? Would you prefer a black box computer algorithm or rather the black box of a translator's mind? Well, as far as I am concerned, I trust a human being more. First of all, the question of confidentiality. As you may know, numerous legal texts are confidential, from civil registry records to multi-million contracts between big companies. Clients will continue to resist serious documents being thrown into that largely unknown territory. Then comes liability. If AI produces a translation, who is going to take responsibility for it? Who is going to face the legal consequences? Who is going to be taken to court? Being able to hold someone responsible is a crucial point when it comes to documents that may considerably affect people's lives and businesses. This naturally leads to the question of errors. As we know, AI may hallucinate. If the onslaught of if the output of AI is revised by a human translator, then the likelihood of errors decreases. However, sometimes AI translation may look good enough to trick the translator, especially a less experienced one, into believing that the target text is correct. Then comes certified translation, which I mentioned before. A lot of documents for official purposes need to be translated by a certified translator, in Poland, a sworn translator. It is not possible to have an AI algorithm translate such documents for court purposes. For these reasons, I believe that while less important jobs may be more and more often delegated to AI, which comes with some risks, experts will not complain about too much free time. Yet, they need to be flexible and be prepared to accept, apart from typical translation assignments, various post editing and revision tasks. These, however, call for knowledge, detail orientedness, and attention. Some of them may find it interesting to be the supervisors of AI tools. Why not? Now I will move on to the brief case study of a power of attorney. In Polish, this document is called pełnomocnictwo. This is a, legally speaking, a juridical act, typically a paper or electronic document in practical terms, whereby you authorize someone to do something on your behalf. For instance, if you are too busy or would like a professional, like a lawyer, to represent you. For instance, in court, but not necessarily. I used ChatGPT 5 to translate this document. I used the free version. And let's see whether it did well. Overall, the quality seems impressive, especially at first glance. Yet, when you look more closely, you can spot some problems. First of all, for example, it is generally good that the machine did not translate the designation of the business form. For example, by replacing spółka z ograniczoną odpowiedzialnością with a functional equivalent in English speaking countries like a private limited company. However, it might be worth adding some explanation of this acronym unknown to foreigners in the brackets. The same goes for other acronyms like KRS or PESEL. Of course, this depends on the purpose of the translation, its readers, etc. The translator has to make some decisions in this regard, thinking about all their partners in this communication process. And I bet a human partner is still better at understanding other people's needs. But there is a more serious challenge, and actually a very serious one, related to the differences between legal systems I mentioned. When you look at who grants this power of attorney, these people are called prokurenci. Prokura is a special kind of authorization to represent a business. In Poland, we distinguish between ordinary power of attorney and prokura, which can be translated differently, for example, as commercial power of attorney. Procurant is then a holder of commercial power of attorney. This is a distinction unknown in common law systems, that is most English-speaking countries, which makes its translation challenging. In this document, in which both institutions are actually referred to, it is important to distinguish them. Yet, for ChatGPT, there is no difference. It has translated prokurenci as attorneys without making this important distinction. A serious error to be spotted by an expert legal translator and perhaps invisible to a layperson. Now, something good about ChatGPT. I must say I was impressed by the fact that the tool didn't get itself tricked by the word Paris and did not translate it as Paris. More problematic is, however, the word municipality, which, according to ChatGPT, corresponds to the Polish word gmina. Żnin is a mixed urban and rural commune. Commune, by the way, is a word I would prefer, whereas municipality sounds like an urban area. Not a very serious mistake, and perhaps a term some would argue to be somewhat acceptable, but I still find it not too precise, and precision matters in legal documents. There is one more problem in the opening paragraph. We could discuss whether there is a difference between w związku z zawarciem umowy and w związku z umową zawartą. But in my opinion, there may be a difference, as the former refers to the fact of concluding an agreement and the latter may suggest a reference to its content. ChatGPT decided to make a grammatical transformation, thanks to which the text sounds more fluent, but it still may not convey the legal sense precisely enough. And in legal texts, precision has to win against style, if they cannot be reconciled, of course. Finally, another serious problem. The word firma and its equivalent, according to ChatGPT, company. These words are quite tricky and they mean different things in everyday language and legal language. And additionally, the word company means different things in the legal varieties of British and American English. The word firma in the Polish text is not used professionally, by the way. And yes, legal documents are often far from ideal. It is the translator's role to decide how to handle such situations. I'm not going to go into great detail, but it was a mistake to use the word company here instead of business. This business form, spółka cywilna, is not a company in the professional legal sense of the word, but it is a partnership. Well, to make matters worse, Chat does not explain the acronym, the SC acronym, for instance, as a civil code partnership, which could be done in brackets. To say something good about chat, again, it did not touch the address, which is a proper way to proceed in such cases. Again, this part, strangely separated in Polish, is not translated properly, as the preposition to seems to be missing. Generally, ChatGPT handled some of the challenges well. I must say, in some cases, please don't take offense, it outperformed my students who are just learning to translate when I assigned this task to them. However, Chat made tricky mistakes which could lead to confusion and which can be spotted by an expert reviser. Therefore, I'm inclined to believe that a non specialist, quite happy with the natural feel of the English text, would not spot them. Therefore, this example proves that true experts are still in demand. Now I'll offer some final remarks regarding your potential future career as legal translators. Perhaps based on this short case study, I managed to show that generally the performance of such tools is often quite good. I mean, it is good, it looks good, it sounds good, but the seriousness of some mistakes, even if there is just one, may actually change everything. A critical error may make the fact that the rest of the document sounds perfect completely irrelevant if the client suffers some damage. What I strongly believe, therefore, is that there is a bright career path for the brave. The brave who are not so much panicked when they hear AI, and those who are not so afraid of a bit of learning. Well, a legal translator needs to have a competence in several areas. We could group them into three main categories. Non specialists generally think that to translate, you just need to know two languages. Of course, this is a necessary prerequisite, but not the only one. When you work in a specialized domain like legal translation, you obviously also need to have some subject matter knowledge. However, first of all, you need translation skills, broadly conceived. There is a kind of toolbox and also some interpersonal uh, skills specific to this profession. Generally, you also need to know how to translate, and there is a body of knowledge about that. So, this is my short roadmap for becoming a legal translator. But for the sake of explanation, I would just like to emphasize that not all of these steps are to be completed one by one. Often they can and even must be taken simultaneously. Generally, you are typically expected to have a university degree, and the most natural choice is a field related to linguistics, although this is not the only option. Of course, I recommend the University of the National Education Commission in Krakow, where you can find a team of specialized experts and learn from them. You can even join the Great Legal Translation and Legal Language Research Club. Okay, the end of product placement. A good idea is to choose a specialization module in translation studies or pursue a postgraduate program in specialized translation. To practice legal translation, you obviously need to build up your legal knowledge, and this means learning about the legal systems not only of your own country but also of the countries whose languages you are going to translate. This is not really the knowledge of the provisions of law. The main point is developing an understanding of how law works, what the structure of the legal system looks like, what some connections between its various elements are, and what methods lawyers use. The knowledge of comparative law will be a great advantage too. However, this does not mean you need a law degree. Most legal translators don't have it, although it can be an advantage and some top employers may expect it. Obviously, you should also familiarize yourself with technology, trying to turn it into your ally. Also, be flexible to make sure you can diversify your activities where and when necessary. The reality keeps changing and you need to be vigilant. Another important point is to practice and look for challenges. Practice makes perfect, and to learn how to translate, you should translate. Also, to know how to supervise machine translation and the modern AI tools, you need to know how to translate in the human like mode. Well, find a practical placement, look for your first clients, find a mentor who will be able to guide you, generally challenge yourself. An important step in your career may be becoming a sworn translator or finding an in house job as a translator in a governmental or international organization. Finally, an important part of this whole adventure is having fun when translating legal text. This all might sound very serious, very sophisticated, perhaps distant, perhaps even far fetched. But translating legal texts may be a true adventure, and discovering the differences and similarities between legal terminology and legal systems is a rewarding challenge, also in cultural terms. Law itself is a fascinating field, so if you like legal dramas, perhaps you can enter this world as a legal translator and become one of its actors. A final remark, or actually a quote for today: the future has several names. For the weak, it is impossible. For the faint hearted, it is unknown. But for the valiant, it is ideal. And I hope you will be the valiant ones. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a pleasant journey towards your career as a legal translator. Thank you very much.